if speaking Russian makes you Russian, then Americans must be English, and a big chunk of Africans then must be French. At least that's the logic that Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff thinks Ukraine must accept. Witkoff has repeatedly said that Ukraine should surrender its Donbas region to Russia, because it's mostly Russian-speaking. Of course, Witkoff didn't come up with this idea himself. He's simply repeating what he heard during a lesson of Russian propaganda history, given by none other than Putin himself. Wait, but why do most Donbas residents indeed speak Russian, not Ukrainian? To explain that, we need to go back to 1897. Back then, nearly 70% of people in what is now Ukraine's Donbas region called Ukrainian their mother tongue. The language was also widely spoken in nearby regions of modern-day Russia, like Kuban and Kursk. Back then, Russian was called Great Russian, while Ukrainian was dismissed as Little Russian. The Russian Empire coined these terms to reconcile an inconvenient truth. If Ukrainians and Russians were one people, as Moscow claimed, how would it explain why they spoke two different languages? Still, those made-up terms were only a temporary fix. Russia needed to correct this inconsistency, and it spent the next century trying to do so. Under the Soviets, Ukrainians faced deportations and the man-made famine known as the Holodomor, which killed up to a quarter of Donbas population. When the USSR turned Donbas into an industrial powerhouse, Moscow flooded the region with Russian workers. Russian speakers got the best jobs and housing, while Ukrainian speakers were pushed aside. Russian became the language of opportunities. By the 1970s, the last Ukrainian school in the region's largest city, Donetsk, was shut down. And that's how you manufacture a Russian-speaking region, with a bit of social engineering, some cruelty, and a century to spare. Sure, you can force people to speak another language, but erasing who they are is a different task altogether. Even after years of living in independent Ukraine, most Donbas residents continue to speak Russian. But guess what? It didn't stop them from identifying as Ukrainian and wanting to be part of Ukraine, as multiple polls showed. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 and then escalated in 2022, it did so under the pretext of protecting Russian speakers. What it actually brought first and foremost to Donbas was destruction and death. This war is just the latest chapter of Russia's centuries-long effort to erase Ukrainian identity. Just this time, it's carried out with missiles and drones instead of policies and repressions. So, before making any demands of Ukraine, Steve Witkoff should get his facts straight. Speaking Russian in Ukraine doesn't mean you are Russian. It means you or your ancestors survived Russia.